Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Mill. I'm your host, Rachel Ballatori, the founder and CEO of Mill & Co. We are joined today by a really impressive human being, Jodie Nazaka. Her pronouns are she, her, and hers. Jodie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, likewise. For those who are not familiar with Jodie, let's get to know her a little bit more. She's the Director of Economic Development for the city of Manchester, New Hampshire, where I currently live. She brings over a decade of experience in municipal community development, and her educational background includes a master's in public administration from Southern New Hampshire University, a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Planning, and a minor in Geographic Information Systems from Plymouth State University. In addition to her academic achievements, Jodie holds various certifications, including one in creative placemaking from the Institute of Art and Design at New England College, and another in leadership and management from the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension. She's an active and dedicated member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. She's responsible for elevating the city's stature as a hub for both employment and entertainment. Her work directly impacts the city's economic growth and vitality, making her a key player in the local business community. She champions a thriving business environment, prioritizing local businesses' growth and retention while shaping a cohesive brand that instills civic pride and mirrors the community's core values. For those of you who are watching and live in Manchester, you know how critical and wonderful the work is that Jodie is doing on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
It's always fun to hear your bio back too. It's like my favorite part of these podcasts with our people that come on. Because I'm like, when's the last time you read your own bio? Isn't that nice to hear?
That's a really great point because, yeah, I very rarely actually read it or update it. And when people ask for it, I'll go in and I'll tweak a few things, but I don't actually sit there and read the whole thing. Shame on me, I guess.
Yeah, we
Um,
should be reading our bios to ourselves in the mirror like weekly is like what I'm going to take away from this podcast for sure.
we're probably missing so many things, so many updates about ourselves that we just don't even catch.
Right. Yeah, 100%. So let's get into it, Jodie. If the city of Manchester were described as a person, dead or alive, with its own values, ambitions, and character, what kind of person or who would it be?
Ooh, I like this question. I don't think I can think of a specific person, but I can think of some characteristics of what this person would be like. And for Manchester, it's definitely going to be someone that's a hard worker, likely grew up in a blue collar, hardworking family, has familiarity with getting their hands dirty, has a bit of an innovative and maybe an inventive background. But hate to say it too, maybe even a little bit of suffering from an inferiority complex, never feeling like they're good enough, never feeling like they can stand up to their neighbors, the Bedfords or the Hooksets or the Auburns, but always being a great person and holding those characteristics, but humble and so I'm sure there is a person out there that meets all those characteristics, but Manchester really is a really hard-working, blue-collar type of person with really strong community ties that likes to meet with their neighbors, get involved. And part of that inferiority complex that I mentioned is part of my role here with the city and part of what I'm trying to shake out of the city of Manchester and shake out of the residents. Like, we are good enough. We are a great city. You are a great person. So I think that's how I would probably describe Manchester as a person, is just, just a hardworking with a lot of tenacity.
Yeah. It's one of our favorite questions that we ask our clients at Mill and Co. when we're doing our blueprint work is, if your brand had like a spokesperson, who would it be and why? And a lot of defining that human and those characteristics you just outlined help shape things like personality and tone of messaging. So it's always so fascinating for me to hear how people choose to define their brand, their organization, or who they represent. It's just such a fun exercise for me. And I'm not from New Hampshire. I'm from upstate New York in Rochester, New York, but I've lived in here in Manchester for a few years now. Moved in 2021. Uh,
Oh, right during the thick of it.
oh yeah, so super fun. Met my husband. It was great. So that was fun. But everything you described is exactly how I would describe Manchester, and also a little gritty.
Yes, I was just about to say that. A little bit gritty. And
Yeah.
yeah, honestly, Rachel, it took me a while to come around to that word. At first, when people would describe Manchester as gritty, I hated it. I thought it was a bit of a negative term. And the more I leaned into it, the more I read about it, and the more I heard why people were calling Manchester gritty, the more I was like, okay, I get it. And you're right. You're right. It's not you go to some of these perfectly man-made towns that are popping up in the Midwest right now, and they don't have that grit because they're just plopped there. Where Manchester, like a lot of the towns in the north, the cities and towns in the northeast, these older communities, like they came from the coals, they came from the mill yards, and like our bones show that. And so I am all in on the word gritty now, and I totally agree. That's how a great word to describe Manchester. And I actually went to Raleigh, North Carolina, and I saw a lot of like a baby Manchester in Raleigh, North Carolina. Really cool bones, but a little bit gritty, had some arts and culture to it. And I could see Manchester being, it's maybe not as big as Raleigh, but at some point growing up to be like a little cousin of Raleigh.
Yeah. Yeah. Grit is not a negative term by
No.
any means. Yeah. So you have a pretty extensive background in environmental planning, geographic information systems. Talk to me about how the work, the education, the certifications you have shaped your approach now to economic development.
Yeah, so in kind of like non-professional terms, my background really is in land use development and map making. The fancy way the college decided to spin it was with environmental planning and geographic information systems. But really, I just
Sounds
went to
good.
school for, yeah, it makes it sound so much more high tech. Um, but when I was figuring out what I was interested in or what I wanted to go to school for, I knew I wanted to go for something that I found interesting because that's how I just wasn't someone that wanted to go to school. So as long as I was something I was interested in, I knew I could thrive in it. And I was always interested in maps. I was always interested in geography, and I was always interested in place-based type of just learning.
Mm.
And through that, I found land use planning and map making. And I started off with an internship actually with the city of Manchester right out of college. And it was in the planning and community development office. And through that, I really got a passion, like, call me crazy, for the work of a civil servant and working with planning boards and working with developers to find how cities get developed, how they expand, how they grow, but how they keep it mindful. You can't overgrow, you can't grow too soon. You have to, more houses you build, the more infrastructure you need. So there's always these moving parts, and I just found that so fascinating. And I stayed with the Planning and Community Development Office for a while. Ultimately, I ended up in Long Island for a bit, and that was lovely. But I decided, home was Manchester, so I came back. And after 7 years in the Planning and Community Development Office and working with the subdivision site plan regulations and kind of telling people what they couldn't do because of the regulations, I really wanted to be a part of what we could do and saying like, okay, well, let's figure out, instead of telling you no, you can't do that, like let's change the narrative and figure out like how can we get someone in here to do this. And so the city went under a whole master plan overhaul in 2019 through 2021, and I was fortunate enough to lead that. And through that, it was such an inspiring experience. I got to work with so many community members. We did a whole bunch of on the table discussions, community focus groups, a week long planning charrette where we brought our consultants in from across the country. We did all kinds of hand on activities. It was a process never done by the city before.
Mm.
And this was started in 2019. So social media was really just starting to ramp up. So we leaned into that. We used websites, we used social media, we brought meetings to people rather than expecting them to come to us. And I really loved that. And that's where I kind of got my passion for economic development and growth. And it was just kind of all history from there. And through that, I got involved with placemaking. And for anyone listening that's not familiar with placemaking, it's essentially making places that are undesirable, underutilized, essentially a place you would just kind of pass through on, let's say you're where you park in your car at the parking garage for work, and then you have to walk a couple blocks to the office. And you just walk by a couple unassuming blocks, maybe a park, and there's nothing there. Turning those spaces into activated spaces, so now you can sit, you can congregate, you can take a photo. Um, all kinds of things like that that can make those spaces more enjoyable and get people to sit and linger and have a little bit of moments of respite. So that's a little bit of what placemaking is, and that I got really into that, and through that came economic development, and that's how I'm in the role that I'm in now, and creating a city of Manchester that people want to be in.
Mm.
Um, we have this, like, going back to the inferiority complex. We had this negative perception of the city where people were saying Manchester is unsafe, Manchester has a lot of homeless, Manchester this, and it's like any city, we're going to have our challenges, but that's not the Manchester that I see. And so trying to change the narrative through all types of economic development tools is what I'm really focusing on. And I owe a lot of my background in land use development and mapping to that. So I'm really fortunate for that.
I have to ask, do you watch Parks and Recreation?
I do. Yes, I
So are
do.
you the Leslie Knope or the April Ludgate or
So
the Ann Curry?
funny enough, actually neither.
Neither Ron Swanson?
In the early seasons, do you remember Mark Brandanowitz?
Of course I remember Mark Bandanowitz.
That was me. I was Mark Brandanowitz in the
Planner.
planner. Yeah.
Yeah, the city planner. That's too
Yes.
funny. I'm sure you get that all the time and it's probably super annoying, but all I could think in my head was Leslie Knope trying to create this incredible park and the Harvest Festival and all these things. And anyway,
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally do relate to Leslie. It's funny that they made her a Parks and Rec director because I feel like she's more of like a town administrator. Just she's trying to do
right.
so much.
Yeah.
That whole show when it first came out, oh my God, it was so real life. It was hilarious.
It's kind of what I equate to my friends who are doctors and watching Grays or Scrubs. And I'm
Right?
like, does this happen? And they're like,
Yeah.
kinda, yeah. It's like we feel seen and heard, there's someone
Yes.
out there for us. The town hall, like, yeah. For me, it's
Oh,
just, Mad Men and that's it for marketing agencies. There's not a whole lot.
yeah, no, I mean, it's so true. There's one episode of Parks and Rec where it's Leslie and sitting on the stage, and she goes, "Wow, great turnout. Thank you so much for coming." And they pan to the audience, and I think there's like four people in the audience. I feel that. I feel that.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there. Yeah, wow, what a great audience.
Yeah.
That's funny. So cities are kind of like startups in their own right. They're adapting, they're growing, they're changing, sometimes they're reinventing themselves. In that sense, what stage do you think that Manchester is in?
And this is a great question because I was just at a conference last week in Washington, D.C. It was the International Downtown Association conference. And one of the speakers said, it was a conversation about fear of change and people saying, we don't want to see more development in our cities. We don't want to see, in a post pandemic environment, everything has changed and what's the new normal. And we get that a lot in Manchester, and it's mostly from an older demographic that remember the Manchester when they were younger. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was a better Manchester. I remember things when I was younger that maybe I missed, but that doesn't mean that the city as a whole was better back then.
Mm.
And I was trying to remind folks when they say, well, I remember this and I remember that. Like, imagine if a city was like a human and we change just like a startup. We change, we adapt as we get older. We improve, we decline, we go through phases as we get older, and so do cities. And so if we didn't change like humans, we can't expect ourselves not to change. So why are we expecting our cities to not change? It's just part of the way the world works. And technologies change, and we're adapting every day. And we can't expect to just not, because that's when cities fail. If cities don't keep up with technologies and they don't keep up with what people are looking for right now, we know in Manchester that we are seeing a lot of net migration here to the city because people are looking to get out of Massachusetts, whether it be from the tax increases, just the overcrowding in the Boston area. Manchester and southern New Hampshire are doing really well. We're one of the only areas that have seen, albeit small, a net increase in our population. Places like Vermont saw a big boom during COVID. They're starting to drop. Massachusetts is dropping in population, and even Maine, that which saw an increase in population, they're starting to drop. Um, so Manchester and the southern New Hampshire area, we're doing really well. And this isn't new to us either. I'd say every decade we see a resurgence come to the city. You know, we had the mill buildings in the 1800s that brought so much advancement to the city. And the city was built around the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company. And then, you know, sadly, with changing technologies, a lot of that industry moved down to the south in about the 30s and the 40s. And then those mills kind of sat vacant for a while. Well, then they got a resurgence in the 90s, and then some tech industries started moving in, and we started to see more computer type of startups and technology. And then that kind of died down. And now we're seeing a whole new industry with biofabrication. And we're seeing completely new advancements in healthcare and how we treat um, chronic diseases and regenerating human cells, tissues, and organs to treat type 1 diabetes,
Mhm.
kidney failure, all kinds of things that are really impacting the health of our citizens and across in America, but also across the world. And that's happening right here in Manchester. So it's hard to put like what stage are we at classification on Manchester because we've been here before.
Mhm.
It's part of that life cycle, and I'd like to say we're in the very early stages of an urban renaissance right now, in large part because we're seeing a lot of out of area residents move in with new perspectives, new thought processes. They don't have this like this is how we've always done thing mentality, and they oftentimes are coming from larger cities and they're okay with some of the challenges that others might say plague Manchester. To them, this is paradise.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool time to be in Manchester to see. I mean, you if you came in 2021, Rachel, you've probably seen so much change in just a short period of time.
Tons.
I've seen so much change since 2019, right before the pandemic happened to now. It's completely different how our downtown looks. So
Right.
it's really exciting, and I love to see where we're going and where we'll end up.
Yeah. Me too. I never thought I would end up in New Hampshire as a New Yorker, but here we are, and I'm very content being here. You mentioned that you're working to position Manchester as a hub for business and entertainment. As an entrepreneur myself, living in Manchester, I'm curious to get your take on what do you see as the biggest entrepreneurial opportunities in the city, and why should entrepreneurs choose Manchester as the place to grow their business?
I mean, shameless plug, the Economic Development Office, we are super business friendly. The city, we will roll out the red carpet for businesses that are looking to open here in Manchester. Um, but the state as a whole, our tax-free nature here in New Hampshire is really business friendly. We have been seeing more big businesses move into the southern New Hampshire area because of that tax-free, the New Hampshire way. Um, and if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking for a startup, there's so many opportunities, whether it be from community connections,
Mm.
just getting your foot in the door and meeting new people. There was just a networking group last night where people could just from all different industries connect and collaborate and get, you know, their foot in the door about, hey, I'm starting this business. It may not be relevant to what your business is, but you might know someone that could help me. And it's amazing how in a small city you have access to so many different individuals. And I had someone say that to me once that in a city of a similar size, it was a suburb somewhere in LA, that they could never imagine being at a gala
Mm.
and speaking with the city's economic development director while also sitting at a table with the mayor. And then also the governor walks in. But that's how it is here, is that you have so much access to that intellectual capital from the nature of our small state.
Right.
It's just at either you walk out your door and you'll see it, or you can just pick up a phone or shoot an email and you can get connected with anyone and that you need or want to. And I
Right.
think that really goes far for these new business startups and these entrepreneurs that there's so much access to opportunity here
Mm.
that, and it's untapped opportunity too. And I mean, I'm just so excited that now I think people are starting to recognize that. We also have a lot of resources. It's limited resources because of the tax-free nature of our state. That's the number one incentive, if you ask me. But we do have really great loan programs through our Manchester Development Corporation team. We do have some city incentives. We are building more housing in Manchester than any other community surrounding us. So we're recognizing the growth need that we are up against. So there's all kinds of things. If you're a business looking to move to the Manchester area, there's a lot of infrastructure support around that.
Opportunity and accessibility are an entrepreneur's two favorite words.
Yeah.
So great to hear that. And when you think about fostering a thriving business environment in Manchester, how are you balancing attracting new ventures, oftentimes big ventures, while still supporting and retaining local or more historic businesses that have been a part of the infrastructure of Manchester for a long time?
I like this because, as you can imagine, we get a lot of people asking us, when are we going to get a Starbucks downtown? When are we going to get a Whole Foods? Don't get me wrong, I love those things. But there's a right time and a right place for all of those.
Yeah.
And we oftentimes get people comparing Manchester to Tuscan Village. Tuscan Village is great. I love it. Also, Market and Main in Bedford. Those places are great. But when you go there, what do you notice? It's all chains.
Mm.
They're all chain restaurants. So there is a balance that we need to strike. There's a healthy balance between bringing in those chains, but also making sure you have enough of those small scale, small businesses, locally owned mom and pop shops that can balance off each other. Because the chains are great, but they're a dime a dozen. You can get that anywhere. We call that Anywhere America, that you can go to any community across the country and you're going to find a place that looks like South Willow Street.
Right.
But you can't go to any downtown and find a Stash Box or an Industry East or a 815. Those are things unique to Manchester. So we definitely want to balance our small businesses and make sure they're supported where they need it. And we're here for them. So we are very connected with our local business owners and whatever they need, whether it be like, hey, I'm struggling with this. Is there anyone you can put me in touch with? Or I'm thinking about looking for a partner. I'm looking at selling. Is anyone looking? And it goes back to those connections. So we do that. And then in regards to bringing in those big businesses, we're super connected with what's going on in the mill yard, with what Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Institute is doing with bringing in all these new biofabrication companies. And that's completely changing the landscape because as we're bringing in these new businesses, we're going to need more hotels, we're going to need more housing, we're going to need more hospitality ventures for these people to eat and venture to. So we recognize that as the city grows and we bring in more businesses, we're also going to have to accommodate that. And so there's a seat at the table for everyone, whether it be your small food cart, your hot dog cart in the mill yard, all the way up to your big box Target or your Whole Foods that we're looking to bring in. There's a seat at the table for everyone here in Manchester. And it's just a matter of finding the right conversation and the right incentives and programs that work for each of those companies.
Right. And I'm curious, how do you assess what's right for the people of Manchester? Like if people are saying, we want a Starbucks, and everyone's saying that, how do you determine if that's right for the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would love to say it's me, but what I've learned in this role is that these businesses there's an algorithm that they follow, and it's not by chance that you will find a Whole Foods and Trader Joe's likely right next to each other, and likely in higher income earning bedroom communities. Same thing with a Starbucks. It's usually very high foot traffic, high wage earning downtowns. And for a long time, Manchester did not have that. One, because we did not have any residents downtown. Now, over the last couple of years, we've seen such a shift in that. We've had so many conversions of some of these large scale office buildings downtown that we now are seeing our median income, and don't quote me on this, but I think roughly in 2017, the median income of a downtown resident was $36,000 annual. Now it's over 86,000. So just a
Wow.
short amount of time, it's increased, and that's because we're bringing in higher end, high quality residential units right in the downtown. So as we make those conversions in the downtown, that median income goes up, and those are the types of things that these businesses like a Starbucks, a Trader Joe's, and a Whole Foods look at. So it works to our benefit. And then once we kind of meet those thresholds, then we can start making those pitches, being like, okay, hey, we meet your criteria now. We have this available space. Do you think you'd be interested in it? But right now, a lot of those we don't even make the attempt for because we know we would just get cut to the chopping block floor, because we just don't meet their criteria.
Yeah. And we don't want it.
Right. We have so many great
We're happy
office
to get
buildings.
chopped to the floor because we have Aroma Joe's, Jody. We have
Oh
Aroma
my gosh.
Joe's.
There's Aroma Joe's, and then downtown we have the Bridge Cafe, we have the
Yep.
Mocha Pot, we have Williams and Sons, we have Proba
Oh yeah.
Cafe, we have Hometown Coffee. I know I'm missing a ton. Uh, I
Yeah.
million milliard.
You get your caffeine fix in a lot of other places in Manchester. You can get Starbucks anywhere. Hot
Exactly.
take to say this on a podcast, but Starbucks is actually my least favorite coffee.
Oh,
It's too strong.
that
Too
could be
strong.
a big debate, but also, I mean, I guess we are in New England, so most people would say Dunkin's. That would probably be my least
Yeah,
favorite.
yeah, I get that. So, Jody, you talk about how important it is to shape a cohesive brand for the city of Manchester that's really reflective of the community values. What would you say are the core values of the city of Manchester?
So I love this because we actually did this activity. So my office was tasked with doing a branding and marketing strategy for the Economic Development Office,
Mm,
not for the city, but for our office. And how do we market Manchester to new businesses, to new residents coming in? So it was a tool for us to use um, as we create. Actually, you know, some it'll be too close if I hold it up to the camera, but we have some economic development folders and some report cards that we put this branding on.
yeah.
But as part of that, we did a community survey, and we asked in that community survey, you know, like the traits of Manchester? What are the values that we should put into this brand, into this narrative? And we got things like um, persistent. We got things community connected, persistent. Or some of the other ones, tenacity.
Mm,
Um, and there, I think even I remember seeing gritty in there too. There was all this stuff about basically suggesting that Manchester just pushed through, continued to fight.
mm,
And so the core values of Manchester are all around that. It's all around persistence, rise like a phoenix rising from the ashes, always going to reinvent ourselves, and always going to persevere through whatever challenge. And I'll be honest, coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, Manchester was in a challenge.
mm,
Um, Couple of challenges. You know, we lost a lot of employees in the downtown. Southern New Hampshire University was a huge employer. We lost all of those employees on
right.
top of a lot of the other high rise buildings down here. We lost a few of our bars and restaurants downtown, and just the way people go about their everyday to day life in a post COVID environment was just different. So our city looked and acted and felt different, and coming out in a different way. I don't like to use the word recover from it because it's not necessarily recovering from it, it's just a new way of living life after it. And so we had to make some changes, but those changes always went back to what our core values were. And it was about fighting through. And we've been here before. City of Manchester, we'll get out of it, and I think we did, and I think we got out stronger than we ever have before. And so I always look to those core values. Spirit was another one that I remember being in there as well.
Mm.
But yeah, it always goes back to that like fighter, like a bit of a Rocky, like. Wish
Yeah.
we had like a local Rocky like reference. I guess it'd be Adam Sandler. I don't know. He's not much of a
Yeah.
character.
Adam Sandler in a Hawaiian t-shirt with gym
Yeah.
shorts and a hockey stick in one hand and a microphone in the other.
Right.
That's the
Right.
city of Manchester. And so, I mean, it's such a great example of the pandemic, right? And there's so many cities and communities that were impacted by that. But I'd love to dig a little deeper into that. What were some things and key decisions and initiatives that you and your team put in place to try to help the city move past that time?
Yeah. So when we reopened the Economic Development Office, because actually this office was shut down from late 2019 through 2022, and I took this
Wow.
role in, yeah, so really the toughest time when this city really needed an economic development office for its small businesses, for its, championing the city and what was happening. They didn't have anything. So there was nothing happening in this office. The lights were shut off and the door was closed, closed for business. So we reopened it in 2022. I started in February of 2022, and then I hired the business liaison, Eric Lesniak, in April of 2022. So for a while, we were a two-person team. And one of the challenges we faced was, okay, how do we handle the downtown? All the team that was doing events and cleaning, they're gone. They went away during COVID. So we have no more farmers market. We have no more business activation. We have no more downtown sidewalk cleaning. How do we handle this? And so we got all of the downtown businesses and tax rate payers together and said, we were being pressured to bring back a farmers market, to bring back a parade, to bring back all these events. And it just, something just didn't feel right about it. And so when we actually polled everyone in the downtown, they basically said, like, yeah, we want those back, but you got to clean it up first. You got to clean up your house before you invite people over. And so we heard that loud and clear. We're like, that makes so much sense. We will do that. And so we tried to figure out how we were going to do that. DPW was stretched thin. They couldn't do it. Parking division, we worked with them to see if they could take it on, but it wasn't really a complementary role. So ultimately, we decided to go out to a request for proposals to bring in an outside source street cleaning team, because we found that's what other communities are doing. That's what they're doing in Worcester. That's what they're doing in Cambridge. That's what they're doing in New Haven, Portland. And it was like, well, they're all similar size to us, so let's do that too. And it's the best decision that we have ever done. It has been, so we just finished their first year pilot program. It ended in July. So they finished their first year, and now they're in their first full year of just regular operations. And the amount of trash that they collect, large debris, trash, needles, bulky items, you name it, they're an extra source. So it's supplemental to like the regular trash pickup that the city does. These are supplemental street cleaners that do pressure washing, they water the flowers, they do all that little extra beautification stuff that just a regular city DPW worker wouldn't get to.
Right.
And it's made such a difference. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of in the short amount of time, the few years we've been open, that we've been able to accomplish that, because
Right.
it was not an easy feat. It was bringing in a new contract. It was bringing in it was a lot of, it was a shift on how things were done. That thought process of like, this is how we've always done things. Why are we changing them? It's like, well, we have to. And,
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if it is
yeah,
broke, you got to fix it.
and it was broke. It was very broke. And so it was an opportunity for us to figure out how to fix it in the best way possible. And thinking outside the box and connecting with some of our neighbors in other communities and other states was the best thing. And that's why I just down in Washington, D.C. at that conference, connecting with similar sized municipalities that are going through the same challenges. Like, how do you deal with this? What are your challenges? And it turns out everyone's dealing with the same things we are.
Well, in a way, that's very comforting. And it's
Yeah.
also great, as you've talked through this podcast episode, you want the people, the businesses, the community in Manchester to feel like they have each other, access and opportunity.
Hmm.
You also need that as a representative of the city. And so I think it's so lovely that you and your cohorts are advocating for yourselves to go meet other people and build your own community of how can we learn things and bring this back to
Hmm.
impact our city.
It's so helpful. I bounce things off. I call Concord all the time. My counterpart in Concord and Dover and Nashua, all the time, and they then vice versa. And
Yep.
I tell that to a lot of our elected officials and our mayor, just so they know, this is happening in our state. There's a lot of collaboration. Our cities don't operate in silos. They still do their own thing, but figuring out how it's working for one city doesn't mean it's going to work for the other. But, having those checks and balances and checking in with each other has been extremely helpful.
For the Parks and Rec nerds, this is not a Pawnee Eagleton
No,
situation.
no, no, we don't have
It
that
is
huge.
like at the end of the show when they like finally like
Yeah,
merge together, because Eagleton spends all their money. I've watched that show way too often.
I think
Jody, I'd love
Eagleton
to
was
bring
in
it.
Bedford.
Yeah, right. I'd love to bring it home and just kind of talk generally about the future and you and your experience. For the aspiring entrepreneurs, civic leaders, and students that are listening today, what advice would you give them about building a career that is rooted in integrity and community value?
I would say challenge yourself. Because I was a super shy kid. I was such an introvert. And I just one day I think I realized that the only way that was going to change is if I challenged myself.
Mm.
And I just don't sit still now. I'm just always actually just once I finished my master's, I said to my husband, I'm like, don't let me do anything else after this. If I say to you, I
Power
want
me
to learn
down.
the piano, like if I say to you, I want to go learn Spanish or French, just say no for a little bit and let me just like don't do anything.
Yeah.
And that obviously did not happen. And but I'm constantly pushing for the next challenge, because you're the best person to challenge yourself. You know your limits, and you'd constantly be surprised on how far you can push yourself. And I think that's some great advice to, because if you don't challenge yourself, you may just get stuck in a rut and be okay. And some people may be okay with that. But chances are, if it's an entrepreneur or someone starting out that's listening to this, they're looking for that type of guidance on how to make a difference. And if you're uncomfortable, it means you're doing it right. So putting yourself in those uncomfy situations is, sometimes I don't always like a public speaking engagement or a networking event where I don't know anyone. But if I'm uncomfortable in there, it means I know I'm challenging myself.
Yeah. I tell my team and some folks that I mentor that the term potential is kind of a fake word to me because potential can sometimes assume that there's a limit to that. And
Hmm.
the only limit to your potential is how far you're willing to push it, in my opinion.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. 10 years from now, what do you hope Manchester looks and feels like? Not just economically, but as a community that people are calling home.
This probably goes for outside of Manchester as well. But I hope Manchester can be a little bit less divided, on a number of things. I think we need to come together as a city to to be the best city we can. I travel a lot, and when I do, I'm that nerd that's looking at a trash can in a downtown and be like, oh, that's a cool trash can, or that's a cool park bench, or I really like how their curb looks here. And I oftentimes wonder when people come to Manchester if they're doing that same thing, because I do feel like our city oftentimes feels a little disconnected.
Mm.
We can feel so connected while also feeling so disconnected. And sometimes I feel like that is the nature of New Hampshire. It's not just Manchester, it's just the New Hampshire way. We are a very divided state, through and through, no matter where you go. And sometimes I feel that resonates mostly in our cities. And we're a city of over 115,000. And if you were just in our downtown, you would never know that, because basically you're not on Elm Street or Hanover Street or in the Mill Yard. That's it.
Right.
Um, but yet, Portland, Maine, and Burlington, Vermont are a little more than half the size of Manchester, and they feel like big urban areas. So I'd love to see in 10 years from now Manchester to have a little bit more urban feel, a little bit more urban development, feel a little bit more connected. We are first in the nation primary state. I know that's never going to change. So we are always going to have that grr about us. But maybe in a little bit of an optimist world, we could be a little bit friendlier with each other as we just try and all get along.
I think that that advice, Jodie, applies way outside of Manchester and to
Right.
like humanity in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
just be nicer to one another.
Yep.
All right. So to bring us home, if our listeners who potentially live in or near Manchester could do just one small thing tomorrow to contribute to a stronger, more vibrant Manchester, what would you ask them to do?
Okay. So I do this as well. So I've lived here most of my life. I moved to New York for a while, lived on Long Island and came back. But when we brought in our marketing consultant, I took a lot of heat because we brought in a consultant from Florida.
Mm.
And the reason we did that was because we wanted an outside perspective. We had a number of local firms submit, and I said, I want someone with an unbiased, they don't know anything about this space, and they're going to come up here and they're going to give us their honest opinions about the city rather than like, I live here and I know what it should be. And they did exactly that. The first time they came up, they spent the day adventuring and they came back and we had dinner and they said, "Oh yeah, we rented bikes on Airbnb or VRBO and we went up to Weston Tower and they did all these trails." And I'm like, "Huh? I I didn't even know you could do that. And how did you know to do that? And you just figured that out? I've never done that."
Mm.
And they're like, "Oh yeah, it was beautiful. And we saw Lake Massapequa, and they had the nicest things to say about these things. And they mentioned one park that I was like, I've never been there." And that was me. Taking we take for granted what's in our backyard. And so I guess my message for people if they're looking to be have a little positive impact on Manchester is find something new, discover something new in your city and say something positive about Manchester. It's really easy for us to be negative and it's really easy for us to kind of follow what everyone else is saying. But it's also really easy to say something positive.
It is very easy to say something positive. That's such a lovely message here, Jodie. Well, I can't thank you enough. It's been so lovely getting to chat with you. Your passion for what you do is palpable through the screen.
Oh, thank
And
you.
frankly, as someone who lives in Manchester, I am very proud and feel very comforted to have someone like you at the helm. So thank you for everything that you're doing for our community.
Thank you very much. It was so lovely chatting with you. And hopefully, in a few years, we can have another conversation, or hopefully, it doesn't have to be a few years, but soon we can have a conversation and we'll be talking about all these amazing things we talked about now that look what we've been able to accomplish.
Yeah, we'll circle back on this podcast for sure. For
Yeah.
those who tuned in once again to the mill, thank you so much. We love having you listen and share. Jodie will be tagged in all of our social content, so please feel free to connect with her if you have questions or suggestions or anything about the city of Manchester. Thank you again, Jodie, and for everyone who tuned in, we will see you next time.
Thank you.